And he starts telling us the story about why he's driving Uber. And he's driving Uber to try and save extra money to go to Germany. We're like, why are you going to Germany? He's like, well, I'm from Germany. And whenever I was like, I think he said he was 5, his dad kidnapped him and his older brother and smuggled them out of the country into Iraq and then into multiple other countries, smuggled them to the US, changed their names, changed their birth certificates, and he'd completely lost track of his mom. But just before this car ride, he'd found her.
So, okay, let's just jump right into it. So, you know Ketone IQ?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what this is? The block that it's under?
I don't.
So right now, the ketones are being charged with quantum energy. This is a quantum block that, well, we won't go into that now. I'll leave it a mystery. You can let your imagination run wild. And so we're going to cheers and have a shot of these before the interview. Okay. You know about ketones, like what the effects of them?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we won't need to go into that. But
I haven't tried Ketone IQ though.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. The whole bottle?
Yeah.
Down the hatch?
Down the hatch. Taste, what do you think?
Tastes like ketones.
It does taste like ketones. It's definitely not the worst tasting ketones that I've had. That's
still better than 5 Hour Energy, I think.
Oh yeah.
What you put into your body today is the foundation for who you become tomorrow. That's why I fuel with Ketone IQ from HVMN. They're redefining the limits of human performance, metabolism, and longevity. I use Ketone IQ before every podcast to keep my mind sharp and clear. Head over to hvmn.com and use code CaptainMorgan_20 to get yours today. Back to the show.
All right, let's jump into this conversation. Joe Lindley, aka Indiana Joe. Welcome to the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited for this conversation because it seems like you like adventure. Yeah? Would that be an accurate statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty accurate.
Adventure is one of my core values. So I was studying your Instagram and YouTube before this episode, and it looks like your life is an adventure. Yeah?
I try to make it that way.
Okay.
I think that people probably think it's a little more adventurous than it actually is generally because I, like creating content, but that's just the nature of things.
Of course, we're getting the highlight on the Instagram.
For sure.
I understand this.
My favorite moments.
Yes, exactly. What got you into content creation? Like, from what I saw, you went to college, and then after that, what happened? What was the start of the adventure?
The true start to the content creation adventure was in high school. The GoPro Hero 2 reveal video came out. And I don't know if you remember, but it was Glitch Mob to music. And it was just all of the best GoPro shots. People wingsuiting, base jumping, wakeboarding, all of the extreme sports. And I'd been wakeboarding for a while, and I wanted to get into, videography because that would be really cool. At the time, I was a sophomore in high school, and I told my buddy that I would in the future ride dirt bikes with. I told him that I was going to get a GoPro. He's like, "What do you have to GoPro?" So I took that personally.
Yeah.
And from then on, got my first GoPro, started filming pretty much everything I did adventurous, like went to the Grand Canyon with my dad. It was nothing like I'm currently doing, but just kept videoing. And then one day I just looked up and I had this massive stockpile of footage and I'd never done anything with it. And so I went on a trip with my buddy David to the Bahamas, and we did some free diving. And on that trip, he taught me how to use iMovie. And that was just the end of it. I mean, I started creating videos for all of our trips. You know, on the first trip, all your friends are making fun of you. And then you make the first video, and then they're like, on the next trip, they're like, are you making a video this time? So I did that for some ski trips, trip to Costa Rica, trip to the Grand Canyon, which is a huge part of my life, definitely changed it. It was my first like kind of near-death experience with 3 other guys that I felt responsible for. And then from there, I just kept making footage, kept trying to plan that next adventure because I knew that adventure was where I would create myself. And so I just went off on that path. And back in 2021, I decided that I was going to do 75 hard and I was just going to record every single day. And so I did it on TikTok and then grew my following, which eventually drove me to be like, I'm going to do something crazy. Let's ride a bike across the country and film a documentary for mental health awareness. And it was just like on the spot. I mentioned it to a friend and I was like, did I just volunteer myself for that? She was like, absolutely. I was like, okay, well, I don't even have a bike. So let's try and learn how to clip into a bike. But it was that trip and Kilimanjaro where I really fell in love with not just creating cool shots and epic scenes of, you know, action, but actually creating that story. And that story was what really changed my whole perspective on content creation.
Which, by the way, the storytelling that you're referring to absolutely comes across in the content, like the music, the shots, all of it. It's fantastic.
I appreciate that.
So let's start back at the beginning, the Grand Canyon trip. What was that first near-death experience? Walk us through that story.
The Grand Canyon in a nutshell. Let's see. So spring break, sophomore year in college. You know, we'd done that classic spring break in Gulf Shores, Alabama, freshman year. And everyone was going to Cabo and they were spending like $1,500 on this, you know, epic trip to go drink for 7 days. And we wanted to do something different. We also didn't have the money, but we wanted to do something different, something more adventurous. And so we just decided, my buddy Jack at the time had an interview with a company called Tilt, which was like a crowdfunding for parties and for, you know, big things together. He had an interview with Tilt in San Francisco, but it was going to be remote. But we just decided that we were going to drive him to that interview in San Francisco. So from College Station, I planned this massive road trip across the country, 10 days, and planned it down to the T. Like, this gas station, we're going to stay here this night, you know, this many hours to this place. 10 days were just mapped out completely. I obsessed over that instead of school. But we took off. The first 10 hours, we ran out of gas on the side of I-10. So the whole thing was shot from there. The first night in El Paso, Guadalupe Peak, which is the tallest peak in Texas, that was our first stop. My truck got vandalized. And then the second night, my truck broke down in Joshua Tree. And so the whole trip was just full of these massive highs and massive lows already. You know, like, we had to stay for a day and a half in Palm Springs. And while my truck got fixed, and so just find something to do. And we were supposed to be on the, not Fantasy Factory, but what's the other one? Ridiculousness. They wanted to use one of our clips and they were going to bring us in for the show, but they ended up not getting back to us. It would have been too soon. But we planned to go to Yosemite, and I'd done all this planning, but no research. You know, it's March. I'm just picturing Yosemite, Half Dome, hiking it in the summer. But we started driving into Yosemite, and we see all this snow around us, and people have snowmobiles in the back of their trucks. And we're like, why are people with snowmobiles coming through here? So eventually we hit a road closure, and it's like snow track only beyond this point. And so we're just stuck in the water. We've driven 7 hours from San Francisco to Yosemite. And now we have to find out what we're going to do. And so we're just like, all right, it's 10 hours through the night to the Grand Canyon. Let's go. So we hop in the car again, stay up all night long, drive, show up there at about like 8 a.m., walk inside with 2 of my buddies. The other one was asleep in the car while we signed him up for this. But the park ranger's like, there's no remote camping available in the Grand Canyon right now. We're sorry, you missed the rush. Everyone took everything. We're like, dang. Okay. And she's like, well, actually, there's one spot. There's always that one spot, right? That no one wanted. She's like, it's 9.2 miles in and 9.2 miles out. There's only water at the beginning and the end. And so one of my buddies next to me is like, all right, we have to do it. She's like, no, you don't have to do anything. And starts basically telling us these stories of epic misadventures in the Grand Canyon and, people dying of, thirst or starvation. We ended up taking it anyway and signing up our buddy that was in the car without telling him. And so he wakes up and we're like, we're hiking. He's like, how far? So
as far as
until
we get there.
Until we get there. So we load up our water and start this hike into the Grand Canyon at like 2:30 p.m., like way too late in the day.
Yeah.
But we just cruised all the way down. None of us had done a canyon hike before. And so we hike in. None of us have done a canyon hike before. We've done, mountains. And so you get the hard part done first and then you come down and that's the jarring part. So we just basically run down the Grand Canyon, get all the way to the bottom. We have blisters already. We haven't thought about this massive hike out, but we spend the night under the stars in the Grand Canyon. We also forgot to tell anybody what we were doing, that we were going to be out of cell service. We haven't probably texted our parents or our friends in at least a day by the time we start this. And wake up the next morning, it's 7 a.m. We start moseying around, getting ready, and then suddenly it's 2 p.m. We have no idea to this day what happened, how it suddenly 6 hours passed, 7 hours passed. But we were like, all right, it's time to start this hike. Keep in mind, it's Sunday and we have school tomorrow, which we didn't plan for, but we decided to, just go for it. So we started this hike out at 2 p.m. And my buddy's getting all the water ready. He's got experience with electrolytes. At this point in time as well, we're sophomores in college, but no one's really advertising that athletes and people who exercise a lot need to use electrolytes, right? It's like drink water, but no one's put salt in your water. Besides, college, high school, but we did bring electrolytes on this trip. We didn't have a whole lot of experience with them. And so my buddy prepared my Camelback with 3 liters of water in it, which was most of our water. And he put double the amount of sodium tablets in it. And I didn't know that. So we both start drinking it. Within the first hour, I had diarrhea on the side of the trail. It was pretty bad.
Fun.
My other buddy's puking. We're like, oh, okay. And it's, 3 p.m. and the sun goes down over the canyon wall in 45 minutes and we still have 5 hours left. So we just keep hiking. We keep hiking. Eventually we pull over to eat something. So I eat some tuna and I have the only water bottle left in my lap. And so I'm getting my tuna ready and my water bottle's open and it just falls on the ground and spills. So we ran out of water at that point and we were hurting pretty bad for a while. I think we went probably an hour and a half. And it got to the point where everyone was cramping up. Everyone was in a pretty bad spirit as well. And so one guy would stop and pull over on the side of the trail and he would be in front. And the only thing that we could say at that point was keep moving forwards, motherfucker. We have to keep going. There's only quitting and going back and perhaps making it back or going forward. And we still had thousands and thousands of feet of elevation to go. So we did that. We just kept going back and forth and stopping and cramping and just keep going and keep going. And I had this moment walking out. I was in the back because long story, and we'll get there with Kilimanjaro, but I decided on trips like this, I would always be in the back because that's where I want to make sure that everyone's okay from. And so I'm in the back and I just have this overwhelming sense of emotion, just overcome me. And I would find out the next year at school that that's called the genius loci. It's the spirit of the place. It's whenever you see this massive landscape or this big forest, or you stand next to this tree and you just have this, maybe it's goosebumps for people. Maybe it's, they get teary eyed. It's this feeling of just presence and gratitude. And despite these circumstances, almost dying, or feeling we're about to die, is 19 and 20-year-olds were this is an incredible experience. And so I vowed that I would never forget that feeling, that I wanted to not chase it, but be present for it whenever it happened and allow that to happen. So we keep going and we're going, and I have this sense of gratitude, but also this small sense of fear. And then we come up around a corner in the Grand Canyon, and the sun's going down. It's just about to go right and hit like the rim of the Grand Canyon and then disappear. And as we round the corner, there is this like gleaming light change, I guess, in some way. And like the sun's doing something different. It's almost like it's shining through something. Mm-hmm. So we're like, what is that? And it's off the trail, probably like 100 yards, like close to the cliff's edge. So we all walk over there, and it's a gallon of water. I mean, it's definitely someone else's water cache. And so if you're listening to this and you lost a water cache or it disappeared on you in March of 2016, thank you. Wow. But there's this gallon of water. And so we all take a couple swigs, take a little bit for our water bottle, but then we leave like half of it. We're like, this is probably someone's, and what if they're in the same predicament that we are? And so that actually gave us enough water to be able to make it out, because we'd made it a couple hours without it. And so we're like, we can definitely do this. And so we keep going, still cramping, still not feeling great, still sick, but, in higher spirits. And then the sun goes down in Arizona in March, and we've all been sweating all day long. There's like, dried sweat on our faces. And then eventually we're drenched in sweat, and it's dropping like quick. It's just, going from what felt like 85 degrees to like probably 45, We're cold. We're all wearing shorts. No one brought sweatshirts. We're not prepared for this. We weren't prepared at the time. We would get better at preparing for these kind of things over time. But we eventually literally crawled out of the Grand Canyon. One of my buddies, like, he just collapsed, and we're within almost sight of the parking lot. It's like the last 200 yards, and he just falls down. We're like, the car is there. Like, can you get up? He's like, I can't get up. So he ends up crawling to the parking lot, and we finish this hike. We drive out of the Grand Canyon, and I don't know if you've ever been, but there's like no service anywhere around it. But there's restaurants inside of the park. Like there was a McDonald's, but you still didn't have service there because it was so far, like in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And we go to McDonald's. Everyone gets like 2 Big Macs and French fries, and we didn't know health at this point.
Well, at that point, it doesn't matter. Like we
were just starving, and everyone ate so quick, and then everyone went to the bathroom and puked it up. It was just like right in.
Just ate way too fast.
Yeah, way too fast. I mean, we were just so hungry, so thirsty. But that's the first trip. That was the trip where we realized, despite this super, super tough experience, climbing out of the Grand Canyon, everything that led up to that as well, like my truck breaking down, things getting canceled, campsites being closed, and then running out of water coming out of the Grand Canyon. Despite all these significant lows, it made all of the highs that much better. And so that's whenever we made the realization that the beauty of life is built into the contrast. It's like you can never expect to always ride your highest high. Otherwise, it's going to feel dull. But if you have these tough moments in life, the breakups, family members passing away, if you have those kinds of moments, then they actually make you appreciate the highs that much more. And what we further concluded is that it's all about the people you surround yourself with. Like if I'd been doing that thing together, or by myself, if I'd been doing that by myself and trying to climb out of the Grand Canyon on my own, I would have been scared shitless. But with 3 other buddies and, turned brother in that one 24-hour period, everything seemed like, a worthy challenge. And so just remembering that the highs and the lows, that contrast of life is what creates beauty. And it's the people that you go through those moments with that help you get to the other side and tough ones, and then celebrate with you at your highs too.
Highest climbs have the best views.
Exactly. Things are cliche for a reason, like they're true. We're like, oh, that's so cliche. Well, there's a reason it became cliche.
I think the people who think it's cliche have never experienced that. Like live, laugh, love. Like that's one of the most fucking cliche things, fucking picture of live, laugh, love up there. But like, if you think about it, like that's really what life is about. Actually living the life that you want to live, loving yourself, other people, laughing, laughter. Are you familiar with Ryan Sprague?
Mm-mm.
He's the founder of Connect with Cannabis. He's a great guy. I was hanging out with him last weekend, and he explained, the phrase laughter is the best medicine. So he explained how that's actually the case, or why that is a phrase, because if you look at an infant, joy is their default state, right? Like, yes, they ride their waves of emotions, but ultimately they end up back in this joy and awe and wonder and endless curiosity, right? So like that's our default state. And laughter can help us get back to that default state of joy and bliss. So laughter is a good medicine.
Do you suffer with stress, anxiety, trouble sleeping? If so, you could be part of the 80% of people who don't get enough magnesium in their diet. Most supplement brands use cheap, low-quality ingredients at ineffective doses. Bioptimizers goes all in on their formulations, combining 7 different forms of bioavailable magnesium. That's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers.
There are so many different routes that I could take after that story. I think the most pertinent one, and one that I love, is the importance of a tribe. Having a crew of brothers, like you mentioned. Talk to us about how you found your tribe and the importance of it.
Wow. Well, I think throughout all chapters of my life, you graduate college and you save a few, right? You save a few guys, not because the other guys suck, just you got along best with those guys, or maybe they saw a specific version of you that, they knew you pretty well. And then college happens. So you go to college, you do the classic college experience, and then whenever you look back on it, you realize that the guys that were really there for you are the ones that were with you in the hard times. And so you keep a few. And then sometimes you get super lucky and you find guys totally randomly in an Uber. You DM them on Instagram because you like their photography. And that's what ended up happening. Right before I graduated A&M, I reached out to this guy that was in my geography program, and he had incredible photography. He'd done this thing called Semester at Sea. It's a study abroad experience on like a cruise ship, and you just go, like, you circumnavigate the world on a cruise ship.
Wow.
You can only imagine the experience, right? Like getting off in Japan and staying there for a couple days. So I really liked his photography, and so I sent him a DM because we were starting Fourwards at this time, and I'm a great creative and definitely a creator, but I didn't have the design eye at the time, but I did have an eye for good design and good photography. And so I reached out to him. I was like, we're looking for a photographer. It's barely a business. We haven't even made but one shirt yet. Here's a shirt, by the way. We'd made our first dry fit, and reached out to him and met him up at a taco shop, and we connected right before he went on a expedition to Patagonia with my previous study abroad professor, and didn't really talk the whole summer. Whenever he got back, he was like super down for Fourwards, for what it stood for, and he felt like he experienced that on his semester at sea as well. The highs, the lows, the contrast, the good story. Every good story has highs and lows. And so we went on a road trip, and I'd just gone through a massive breakup, my first ever massive breakup, and I was a mess. Like, I was the one driving, but, I was just like letting it all out, and this man is just seeing me at my absolute worst, and he stayed my friend. And so guys like that are there for you in the tough times, and just really supportive, even having just met you. Patrick Campbell is his name. He's the one who drove the van across the country because I slid into his DMs. That's where it all began. And then the rest of my tribe here in Austin, I found because I went skydiving, or I took my Uber driver skydiving. I got in an Uber one day, and this guy started telling the story about why he drives Uber. His name's Izzy, and my buddy Jack knew him. And he's like, dude, my buddy's a drone photographer, drone videographer. He does all this stuff. Like, I love your content. And he was doing all this crazy, like, Austin workout content at the time. And he starts telling us the story about why he's driving Uber. And he's driving Uber to try and save extra money to go to Germany. Like, why are you going to Germany? He's like, well, I'm from Germany. And whenever I was, like, I think he said he was 5, his dad kidnapped him and his older brother and smuggled them out of the country into Iraq and then into multiple other countries, smuggled them to the US, changed their names, changed their birth certificates, and he'd completely lost track of his mom. But just before this car ride, he'd found her after 20-something years. Because his mom had posted a YouTube video that she doesn't know where her sons are, but it's been about this long. And the YouTube video found him because of his Instagram. I know a good story whenever I hear it. And so I just start diving in. I'm like, tell me the story. Tell me everything. When are you going? Like, and he tells me, I'm going in a month. And that's why I'm driving Uber. And my buddy Thomas is coming. And I'm like, this is going to sound crazy. But I know you just met me. In fact, you have no idea who I am. I'm just this guy whose buddy is hyping me up in the front seat. But I will go with you and I will pay my own way. And I don't want to hype everybody up. I didn't end up being able to go. His reasoning was, he doesn't know me, first of all, but mainly that this was going to be a really, really serious moment, right? Like, you have to hold space for something like that, and to have a stranger there and videoing you and all of that, it's just gonna be a different experience, and he didn't want to turn it into that. So his buddy Thomas ended up going and filming the whole thing. And it was actually a project that I lost on my computer whenever I was working on it. Unfortunately, things like that happen, but it was my first really, really exciting story. And whenever he got back, I was like, listen, this is also gonna sound crazy, but I'd love to take you skydiving and hear about your experience. And so he ended up saying yes. I paid for his first ever tandem skydive, and I had my skydiving license as well. And so the plan was that I was going to go up with him, jump out, like, say bye, and then he was going to follow me down. And so we went to the drop zone, and he essentially gave me the whole backstory of his meeting his mom and the experience and how it felt. To a certain degree, he would tell me later that it was almost made him feel more lost. And we'll get into that. But picked him up, interviewed him, had an incredible conversation, really, really got along. We go to get in the plane. I have my skydiving rig on. He's strapped up to the instructor. And unfortunately, the winds were too high for soloers. So anyone that's flying their own parachute, there's just not enough weight under that thing to be able to fly it in like a specific mile per hour. And so I ended up being grounded, and he ended up going up, but I just waited for him. And whenever he landed, I was there, and he was so excited and so ecstatic. And I was just there in his face with this camera. And like, in that moment, if you combine adrenaline with tribe, right, you get this massive sense of brotherhood. Yeah. And so from there, we talked and we talked and we talked and we talked all day, and then went back. And whenever we went back to Austin or got back here, we ate a little bit, and, we were pretty tired because, this whole experience, jumping out of a plane will take it out of you, and filming the whole thing as well will do the same. So he was like, listen, I know we're both tired, but my buddy CJ is having his 30th birthday tonight and his grand opening for his business. And there's gonna be a lot of people there. Be a cool opportunity to meet some people. Let me know if you'd like to come. I was like, that's super nice. You're just, at one point you're just an Uber driver to me. You're so much more than that, but now you're like a true friend. So I got home, and I was like, I'll think about it. I got home, and time's coming, and I'm pretty tired. And I have this like feeling. I'm like, I'm so exhausted. I don't want to go. It's just a lot of effort. I'm not drinking at the time either. It'd be a ton of strangers. And so I sit down on the couch, and I go to, turn on a Netflix show, and I text him. I'm like, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it. He's like, that's totally fine. And at that moment, I realized what a rain check implies, right? Rain check doesn't imply you get another chance. A rain check just implies like, if you do invite me again, I'll try and make it, right? And so sitting on the couch, leaned back, all comfortable, cozy, you know, just ready to end the day. And I realized, you know, I know exactly what's going to happen tonight if I sit on this couch for the next 6 hours. I'm going to sit here, watch this TV show, probably eat dinner at some point, and then go to bed. Probably too late, but go to bed. And so I decided, my mom told me one time, my mom told me many times, actually, don't misquote that. She used to always say 90% of life showing up. Seems aggressive, 90%, right? But normally the hardest part is showing up. Like, you show up to the workout, you show up to the practice, you show up to the test, you know, and like, you're there, you might as well give it your all. But like, most of the friction is just in getting up off the couch. And so I got up off the couch and I drove 10 minutes across town, walked into a room full of people that I had no idea who any of them were. And now I know every single one of them, and I still communicate with all of them.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I think that I'm still trying to figure that out. I've really been thinking about, you know, personality for a couple years now. Like, I know I'm a type 7. I know that I'm a Gemini and show it, like, you know, those kinds of personality traits. But I can't really decide. I would say that I'm an extroverted introvert at my strongest. You know, like, whenever I'm feeling good and whenever I'm in a healthy place, I'm an extroverted introvert. Meaning, like, I know that I recharge by myself. I need that time to reflect. I need that time to write. I need that time to create. You know, I can often get burnt out by seeing friends every single day of the week, but whenever it's time, like, I like to be present. I don't want to be in the corner, you know. I also don't want to be the center of attention necessarily. At least I'm not going to search for it. But I do enjoy getting to know people. And I think that by learning that leaning into discomfort brings a very fruitful life, I think it's confused me.
Yeah, I feel similar. Definitely understand what you mean by recharging by yourself. So that's why I asked, like, if I was on the couch and was tired and they invited me to this event that I wouldn't know any of the people, yeah, the first response would be like, hard pass. Like, I'm just going to sit here and be with myself. Okay, so we're at the party, all these people you don't know.
All these people that I don't know, and then met tons of people, you know, just actually decided to talk to people rather than standing in the corner, which is probably what I would naturally want to do. So maybe I am an introvert, right?
Yeah. Yes. And
just uncomfortably.
That would be exhausting for me to, like, when I'm already exhausted, go meet all these new people. That's just like, oh,
and
my
I'm
gosh.
nervous. And I actually ended up, I just remember I ran into a sliding glass door. I thought the door was open. And so, you know, I like turn around after running into a sliding glass door, and I'm thinking that, you know, no one's going to have seen it and I'm going to be able to slip away. But like, the whole party's looking at it.
Of course.
And you know, it actually made them laugh, which probably made them feel closer to me, because they're like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm totally fine. I deserved it." You know, like, whatever the funny way to shrug that off is. But I was definitely embarrassed. And at this party, I met a lot of the people and really the community that ended up pushing me to do a bike ride across the country. That Uber driver was there. Izzy was there. That's his name. And he invited me to this gym called Squatch Frontier Fitness. Have you been yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very familiar.
Massive.
I've interviewed CJ.
Incredible. Yeah. So CJ was my first podcast. It was my first podcast on his podcast. I was so nervous. This is my 5th, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I definitely feel
many more to come.
I definitely feel a whole lot more comfortable on this one than that first one. But CJ was there. It was actually CJ. It was his 30th birthday and grand opening. And so that's how I got pulled into this Austin fitness community and ended up going to Squatch, and then, you know, being surrounded by other great athletes and super fit people. I was inspired to, like, you know, reach their level. You know, what can I do to make myself better? And so eventually I came up with the idea to do the bike across the country. And all those people supported me. Squatch was a huge funder in the GoFundMe to make it happen because I didn't have the money to make that happen. But we did a GoFundMe and had a fundraiser, and were able to fundraise just barely enough to make the whole thing happen through that.
Just to tie up this story, you mentioned that when Izzy was his name?
Yeah, Izzy.
When he met his mom, he felt more lost. You said we're going to circle back to that.
Yeah, before we forget. Yeah, so I did a follow-up interview with him a couple weeks later. We were going to do the structure was along for the ride was what I was going to do. And so we went mountain biking where he was going to take me along for his ride and I was going to take him along for my ride type thing. And so we went mountain biking. And then after mountain biking, we went and grabbed some Pete Terry's and went to Zilker and just laid down and hung out. It was a beautiful day. And we're laying in the mulch, sitting in the mulch. And I asked him, like, how do you feel, like, in reflection? Because, after big moments like this, there's always a drop off, you can't possibly match that level of dopamine. So there's a dopamine crash. And so I was like, how do you feel? He's like, I feel not worse than before I found her or met her, but just more lost. Because you could imagine, most people can't imagine, right? Like being kidnapped from your mother by an abusive father, smuggled around the world. Your name has changed. Your birth certificate's changed. You have no idea where your mom is. Your mom went through a really, really tough time. I won't go into the details of what happened to her after she left, but his dad was a pretty bad dude. And so she got beat up quite a bit, for most of those 20 years. And whenever that happens to you, you create this, you become centered on, this is my purpose. Like, I need to find my mom, right? I need to find my parent. And your whole life is like, I need to find her, whatever I'm doing. I'm saving money to go travel there. Like, it's all based on this one thing. And whenever you're 28 years old and your life goal is realized.
Yeah. What's next?
What's next, right? That's that's a lifelong goal that happens. Like, most people don't have goals that long, or at least they don't realize them that quickly. And so he was just so confused. And I think he's still in probably a little bit of a hermit phase, right? Like, his mom still lives in Germany, but he lives in the US. And I think what he said that day was, now my goal is centered around making as much money as I can so that I can give my mom those years back, or at least try my best. And so that's his life goal now. At least the last time I talked to him, it was. But it's been hard. I haven't seen him in a little bit, but we'll always be brothers. We talk occasionally whenever we can. But he was definitely one of the person that opened the door to Austin for me and really gave me, he's the reason I'm sitting at this table. So Tribe is massive, and it's tough to find. It's hard to work for. You have to put in effort in order to get the right quality and the best quality. People think that, I'm going to show up at, run nights every Wednesday and someone will land in my lap. It's like, you got to talk to people. You got to stop standing in the corner. And if you can, go on a trip together.
Yeah.
Do something fun, something out there, where things can go wrong, and then you can see how people handle it.
Something challenging.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ways to protect myself from EMFs is swimming in the ocean. And even when I can't, I'm still protected with my Aries Tech LifeTune Flex. It protects me from the oxidative stress caused by electromagnetic radiation that can cause things like headaches, fatigue, and trouble sleeping. To get yours, head to ariestech.com and use code Captain Morgan. That's ariestech.com, use code Captain Morgan. All right, back to the show.
Are you ready for another emotional and potentially challenging story?
Yeah.
All right. So as I was going through preparing for this interview, Margaret came up quite a bit. And I could tell that you guys were extremely close, and I was excited to talk about her with you on this podcast. And then I found that you guys had broken up, and that was your first one. So can you walk us through how you handled that, and how and if you have overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that relationship showed me the most about myself. The most so far. It really peeled back a lot of the layers. It peeled back a lot of the insecurity. And it really pushed me into trusting myself and into trusting my own intuition. It was a long on-off relationship, trauma bond, classic. She was a friend first. We met each other like the first week of college. At that point, we had, all the things in common. But by the time that we actually like fully broke it off, we had pretty much nothing in common. I was active. She wasn't super active. I was reflective and growth minded, and that wasn't her main goal. And the nail in the coffin for all of that, in a good way, putting it to rest, allowing it to rest in peace, was the bike ride. We got back together right before the bike ride. She'd saw that I was, committing myself to doing something wild, and, perhaps she wanted to be a part of that. Perhaps she was impressed. I'm not sure. That's up to her to decide what that reasoning was, but I let her back in, and I was excited by it. And I felt changed. I had just finished 75 hard. I'd done a lot of hard things. I was about to do a bike ride, and it sounded great to have someone.
Hold on. When you say I'm about to do a bike ride, this is not like what most people think about. Hey, I'm going to go for a bike ride. When you say I'm about to do a bike ride,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
You're biking across America.
Yeah. Okay. We refer within my friend group. It's just funny because we refer to it as the ride or the bike ride, right? Yes. And so, it's just funny because it will always forever be called that. But
yeah,
in all of our heads, that's what it means. But to other people, are like, the ride. What is the ride?
Yeah. Okay.
So, yes, the ride across America, the RAM, otherwise known as. And we'll get into more of those details as well later, but essentially to give you like an overarching lens, it felt great to have the idea of having someone back home.
Yeah.
Felt great.
Yeah.
Like someone to talk to, someone to update about my day. The idea of that person, of that thing felt amazing.
Yes.
But it was just an idea. And what happened was we were already so different going into the bike ride. There were about 2 or 3 weeks whenever we got back together and started like talking to each other again before I left for this bike ride. We hadn't seen each other, talked to each other in like 6 or 8 months. It had been a while. And so I left for the bike ride, and, the events unfolded. I unfolded and unraveled, and I put myself back together. And on the other side of that bike ride, I'd just gotten back. I was a little bit depressed as well because of that high and not, being at that 55 miles a day bike ride, endorphin level. And she came over one night and she was like, "Who are you?" I laughed. I was like, "What do you mean? Who am I?" She was like, "No, like, who are you?" I don't know what you want me to tell you or explain to you, like, who I am after all of that, And that was really just the realization, like, we were so different people and we were not meant for each other. And from there, it just started falling apart again. And it was scary. I was working at the ocean lab, flipping float cabins and cleaning saunas and cold plunging as much as I could and squeegeeing floors and going through this breakup and just having all this time in my head. You know, it's pretty effortless tasks to do. You know, you don't have to think about folding a towel. You just fold a towel. And so the breakup occurred, and a lot of time passed. I mean, I would say between all of the other breakups and getting back together, there was always that like feeling of, oh, is it going to happen again? You know, are we going to get back together again? But I knew that after this one, you know, I didn't know consciously that it was fully over. You know, there was always that like subtle in the back of my head, you know, what if people completely change, right? Can't hope for that. And time passed, wounds slowly started to heal. I found out, you know, like 8 months later that it hadn't been what I thought it was. And you can like fill in the gaps there. But that like rebroke me again, in the best way. And it was actually, funny enough, like 3 weeks before Kilimanjaro. And so now I had a new, fresh perspective on life and love, and went to Kilimanjaro. And I would like to use this as an opportunity to segue into Lauren Lindberg, who is a incredible feminine that I ran into at Zilker Park one day, right after Kilimanjaro, after I was changed yet again. And she turned out to be not just a beautiful woman, but also a documentary producer, incredibly smart, creative, nurturing, caring. And I wouldn't know all that or some of that for a couple months, but it was one of those moments at the park. I just run to the park to stretch and walk my dog, you know, and walk around the park. And I went to my normal spot. And whenever I was running up to my normal spot, there was this woman walking in front of me, and I was just like kind of blown away. Like, I haven't looked at or seen another female like that before. And I just felt this feeling. So I went to my spot to stretch, and normally I'd only be there for like 2 or 3 minutes. And I decided, I was like, she's laying over there. I need more than 2 or 3 minutes here. Like, I need to figure out if I'm going to talk to this woman, what am I going to say? And so I was like, I'm going to run 5 sprints, like from here to there. I'm going to run there. I'm going to walk back. And on the 5th one, I better know what I'm going to say, you know, like buying myself some time. So 1, 2, 3 sprints. And then on the way back from the 3rd one, I'm like, okay, perfect. And one of the reasons that I was so attracted to her and wanted to talk to her is because she was journaling, and it was 5:30 p.m. on a Friday. She's journaling. She has headphones, and I'm like, I'm at Zilker running and working out on a Friday. You are journaling and reflecting probably about your day or your week, or maybe you're writing a book. I have no idea, but I'm curious what you're writing. So I was like, I'm going to ask her what she's writing.
Great place to start.
It's a great place to start, right? So 4 happens, 5 happens. I'm walking back. I'm like, okay, I need to change my trajectory a little bit. And so I'm walking toward her, and like, you know, my heart's beating fast and I'm super nervous. And I'm like, play cool, play cool. And as I'm walking up to her, this man comes out of nowhere and starts harassing her dog. Like, she's got her dog next to her, and he's like, hey, come here. I want to pet you. Like, let me pet you. And she's like, I don't think he wants you to pet him. Like, Cody, her dog, is not like a super, like he decides whenever someone pets him, not the other way around, you know? She's like, I don't really think that he wants to pet you. And so, but he's just like incessant. He's like, I want to pet your dog. And so I'm like, my plan is foiled. I can't walk over and be like, hey, what are you writing while this man's yelling at her? But I'm also not going to walk away and go back to my spot. That would be like going against this. And so I just walk up and I'm like, what can I do? And so I just sit down next to her like I'm a friend, You know, like maybe this man will see that she's with another man and be like, okay, I'm going to stop, you know, harassing her dog or something. And so I just sit down. She turns around and she like sees me sitting there and she's like probably not startled, but just surprised that there's someone sitting there. And like, that's when it began. Just a random day at Zilker Park where I had this feeling where I was like, I feel like this is one of those moments where you're supposed to show up. And we've been seeing each other since then. And she's entirely changed my perspective on life and love and what a safe relationship can enable you to do. And that is just one of the best feelings. So.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. All right. I feel like this is a perfect time to insert one of my favorite quotes and one of the quotes that I discovered while preparing for this. And it's from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know that quote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it. Fucking love that. All right.
That's a great one.
Yeah. Let's now talk on why it's so important to romanticize your life, right? Because you're a dude. You're having dude experiences, some more exciting and challenging than others, but for the most part, this is like the journey of the masculine, right? When did it become apparent to you that you wanted to start romanticizing your life? And what is the importance of that? Like, well, I could say more, but
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think I turned off autopilot during 75 Hard. Are you familiar with 75 Hard?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't have a whole lot of discipline at that point. Like I'd been working out and lifting for years, but like, was it a consistent split? You know, was it a consistent run? Was it a consistent this or that? It was like, no, I was kind of just like fooling around with it. I was staying in good shape and I was in pretty good shape. But was I really like giving it what I could give it? And so 75 Hard made me kind of relook at that and relook at discipline. And so the interesting thing was, you know, you have to do 2 45-minute workouts. One has to be outside. I wasn't super disciplined yet. And so some of those workouts would be like 2 a.m. walks. You know, if I hadn't gone to sleep yet, it still counted for that day. And so I'd be walking my dog at like 2 a.m. down the street in Austin. And like in the street, you could do it. You know, there was no cars. And so that's whenever I really realized that like I am just doing the most ridiculous stuff right now and no one's doing it. And I feel like I'm super off autopilot, and that the more novel that these experiences become, the more that like I'm going to remember them, right? You do every single day the same. You wake up, you drink coffee, you go to work. You have no idea what that work day looks like whenever you look back on it in 4 years. Like, what happened on this day? You're like, I don't know. But I could name every single day. If you told me the name of the day on the bike ride, because I named them all, it was like day 44, Dances of Ravens, you know? I started doing things like that. Like if I could find something novel within today, what would I name it? And so from 75 Hard, realizing that if I put myself in these kind of weird circumstances that no one was really doing, that I would have really interesting experiences. And so that's whenever I started finding synchronicities in my life, and noticing them more specifically. You know, I think they happen all around us all the time, but it's a matter of if you pay attention to them. The Alchemist was really what started to change my whole perspective. But at this point, a couple years later is whenever it really flipped. And so that's whenever I just wanted to start doing challenges, things that, you know, would challenge me to write, would challenge me to read, would challenge me to change my perspective. And from there, life got a whole lot more romantic. And I started seeing the symbolism and the imagery and not just like made up signs, like, you know, just the same way that your childhood will reflect how you approach relationships. Like the same goes for your childhood and how it will affect how you approach life and the kind of synchronicities that happen. And like maybe there's a father wound in there, maybe there's a mother wound, right? And so finding those synchronicities within your story and then working them out, like the hero's journey. I became super obsessed with the hero's journey. And I think that's really what sent me into this. Like, I need to go find my death rebirth. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, looking back, I know exactly what the event was. But it was really finding out that there's a narrative to everything that happens in your life if you look hard enough. Like, why did this happen? Maybe not why did this happen, was it supposed to happen, but can you make the sense in it? And so once I really started finding the meaning in my life and what it stood for, not only did the novelty and the romanticism go up, but also the suffering went down, because I found out that there was a reason for that suffering.
What was the event?
I think it was day 38 of the bike ride. I got taken out by a dump truck on the side of a freeway outside of Albuquerque, 2,000 miles in. We still had 886 miles left. And I was going down a mountain pass on the shoulder of the freeway, and which was a bikeable route, by the way. It was like designated bike route, number, whatever. And they'd been tearing up highway and like putting in the back of dump trucks to redo the highway a couple miles back. And one of those dump trucks passed me going about 75 miles an hour. And for no apparent reason, as she was passing me, I was going 32 miles an hour downhill. The lady driving the truck flipped a switch to release everything inside of it. So, and this is a belly dump truck as well, not like the classic one that leans back. So if you flip the switch of a belly dump, everything comes out all at once. And so 15 tons of gravel, asphalt, tar, and rock was thrown behind me on the roadway. And so 45 miles an hour relative to my speed, I got swept from behind down the roadway, covered in just rock and debris and rebar and all of this crazy shit.
Wow.
And the truck passed me. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember like 3 or 4 very distinct things. The truck passed me and it got louder. And then I saw a wave of black. And then suddenly I was on my side, and I had enough time in that moment to be like, damn, I can't believe this is it. Like,
wow,
this is what dying in the moment feels like. There wasn't a flash necessarily, but it was like full, this is it. This is this is my end. This is exactly why no one wanted me to ride a bike across the country. Because of the danger here. It's not like you're gonna die riding a bike, but you get hit. But did I really think it was this? And like, I just had this whole streamline of consciousness happen where I'm like, damn. And then I'm still sliding, and I'm like, I'm not dead yet. And I eventually come to a halt, and I'm like, the debris is over my legs. Like, I don't really know what's going to look like. I don't even know if I'm going to have legs. I don't know if I'm going to be able to stand up. And I like slowly stand up, and I'm able to stand, and I like don't look down, but I'm like, I know that my left side is like totally, completely cheese grated. And I look down, my leg's still there. There's no bone sticking out, which is what I thought there would be. And there is debris just all the way down the roadway, probably another 100 yards, and all the way up the roadway, probably 100 yards. And eventually the truck came to a stop on the side of the road. And I looked down, and I am just absolutely just not quite bleeding yet. But that time right before, we were like, oh no, this is going to happen quick. I had a really nasty gash like right here, and then one on my knee too. And so I got up and got off the road, and I'm able to walk. I'm able to stand. like look down and like my limbs and my arms are shaking, like extremely shaking. But I'm here and no broken bones. My bike tire, my bike wheel had been blown out by probably a rock, like maybe this big, that went through the spokes. So you can imagine that if that rock had been 6 inches more forward, right where my ankle was, like I would probably be debilitated the rest of my life, like would be limping, wouldn't have been able to do everything that I have done. Maybe have lost it, I'm not sure. But eventually the cars didn't really slow down because it was right over a hill crest. And so all of these trucks are just slamming into this rock. And I'm like, I need to get off. I need to get away from the highway. I don't know if any of these trucks are going to run off the road. So there was this tunnel under the road, like kind of like a storm wash way. So I walked through that tunnel to the other side, to the median of the road, and then called my friends. And I was like, actually, no, I called my friends immediately because I was like, listen, you need to be here 10 minutes ago, like now. Like I'm fine, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be fine. So eventually they show up. They said it was the longest 15-minute car ride of their life because I was alive and nothing's broken. But like that's all I told them. I was like, not really fine though. So they showed up, and eventually the EMS showed up, and the cop told us that she was arrested for DUI.
Wow.
And she'd had mouth surgery the day before. And that whenever the cop asked her what happened, she said, I don't really know what happened. I can't explain it. I just looked down at the switch and I flipped it.
Consciously?
She had been on painkillers, but I mean, this is one of those moments where I'm like, this is like a divine intervention, because just a couple of days before I'd like shouted to the sky as a joke, like break me, which like be very, very careful about what you ask the universe for, because it definitely tried to, and it definitely did. It definitely did break me, and it continued breaking me for months and months and months. And, getting back from a ride like that, to a breakup and then going through that as well. And it was tough. It was a tough time. But, from the shadows, there's always light, and I would not be even close to the man that I am today if those events hadn't unfolded exactly as they had.
I'm going to completely butcher the pronunciation of this. It is Latin.
You want me to say it?
Yes. You know exactly what I'm going to say. Say it.
Insterquilinius invenitor.
And what does that mean?
It means in filth it shall be found. It's actually the direct translation is actually in the cesspool it is found, meaning like the grossest place you could possibly imagine is where it's found. It is an allusion. It's a Carl Jung philosophy, but it's an allusion to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table whenever they were sent out on a quest to look for the Holy Grail. No one knew where to start looking for this artifact. And so they were instructed, all of the knights were instructed to go out into the forest and to look around, and whatever path seemed the darkest, to start there. And so to me, what this means is whenever I don't want to show up to things, whenever I don't want to have that conversation, whenever I don't want to completely restart on love and what my definition of it is, and completely redefine, other aspects of my life, whenever that seems like the scariest thing to do, is often what will hold the most treasure. And it's underneath that dragon where all the gold is. And so I got this tattooed on my thigh right before the bike ride, about a couple weeks before. And every single pedal stroke, it was right there in my face. Insterquilinius invenitor. And my friend Noah, who I met through CJ, is actually the one who told me that quote the first time. And I was like, that's my Latin quote.
Talk to me about Burnout.
You push yourself really hard, and I think you have to burn out. I think everyone should burn out, but you don't have to keep burning out. It's a matter of you should know where your limit is and where your boundary is, and you should push it. And you should be very careful about not going over it, because going over your boundary, your limit, can set you back even further. And I found that after the bike ride. On the bike ride, riding 55 miles a day for 55 days, I missed a lot of things. I missed cooking. We couldn't really cook. We didn't have a grill or a stove really that wasn't stored completely under the van. I missed cooking. I missed lifting. I missed swimming. I missed running. I missed all of these things. And so I made this grandiose plan in my head. Like, whenever I get back from this bike ride, I'm going to start training for an Ironman. And I'm going to start this and that. And I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week, and I'm going to do all of that. But I didn't know what the dopamine crash would look like on the other side of a success. Like, almost dying twice on the bike ride, and then finally making it to the Pacific Coast, and then just going back home to normal life in like the blink of an eye. Like, you arrive home 2 days later and everyone's still, people have made progress, but like everyone's, for the most part, like still living the same life they lived whenever you left. And like, here you are just like wide-eyed looking around at everyone. Like, do y'all not feel this?
Yeah.
Do y'all not feel this massive change? And so super hard on myself. And Dave Robinson saved me from this deep, deep, dark hole of a depression that I got in. Because number one, I didn't have the endorphins from 55 miles a day of biking. And so I wasn't able to rely on that aspect of happiness. And plus, continuing, my body needed to rest. I needed to allow myself this space of like, you've done something incredibly crazy. You have a little bit of PTSD. Like, every loud sound in the room, I would like flinch, because there was a really loud sound that happened. And Dave was like, he reached out one day. He's like, how are you? Because he also coached me through the beginning of the bike ride. And that would be a good thing to go back into. But he reached out and he was like, how are you? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm being pretty hard on myself. And he was like, why? I was like, because I really wanted to train for an Ironman. I feel like I'm in the best shape I could be for an Ironman at this point. All I have to do is like get my running back up and, swim a little bit more. And he was like, how long have you been back? I was like, 3 weeks. He was like, how long were you gone? It's like 69 days. He was like, how about let's give it at least as long as you were gone before you expect to get anywhere close to where you were whenever you left. I was like, that's pretty good advice. And so I actually ended up doubling it. Just rather than being like, I'm going to do this workout split and I'm going to run this many miles, just being like, move your body so it feels good.
Pause right here. That is something that the majority of people who exercise completely miss the mark on.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's good to train intensely, and yes, we should challenge ourselves in exercise. And there's sometimes, more often than you're probably doing already, that we should just move to move.
Yeah.
Just
commit to movement.
To feel good.
Yeah.
Moving your body feels good. It doesn't have to be to the point of breaking a sweat or exerting your muscles. Like, simply just moving around, like, feels really good. So, okay, continue.
So I've really kind of created I would say my personal brand to myself is like, how can I find these, like, not cheat codes, but these little secrets to avoiding burnout? Like, I want to get better at running. Most people are like, I want to get better at running. So I'm going to buy this workout plan from this influencer. And he's going to tell me to do Monday 4 miles, Tuesday speed workout, Wednesday long run, Thursday recovery, Friday, whatever. This just massive schedule that you're supposed to adhere to every single day by the book. And it definitely gets you better at running. Don't get me wrong. But most people, whenever they buy these programs, they start running, they get to week 2 and they're like, I can't even keep up with this shit. Like, why is running so hard? I have never been more in love with running than I am currently right now. And what I did this month was like, all I said was, I'm going to run every day. I broke 100 miles this month because all I said was, I'm going to run every day. It started out with 2 miles and then 2 miles and then 4 miles and then 2 miles and then 4 miles. I was like, I'm going to run 2 or 4 miles after the first week based on how I feel. 2 or 4 miles. I'm going to do 200 push-ups. That's all I'm going to do for the month. And I'm in better shape than I really was right before the bike ride just because I've been running. And I got invited to do this race called the Texas Independence Relay this past weekend, which is 200 miles from Gonzales, Texas to Houston, Texas. Teams of 12 run through the night. You know, everyone ends up running 13 to 18 miles a piece in 3 different segments. It was incredible. And I did it really well. And all I did was just run every day up until that. And I think that we're constantly overthinking things. Like, we're like, we have to make this as efficient as possible. Like, yes, efficiency is great. But
how about you get consistent first?
Yeah, consistency, but also like efficiency takes out the fun sometimes. Like, I'm going to stick, like, discipline, yes, but like have some flow with it. And enjoy your run, balance it. Don't burn yourself out. Like, if you're going to burn yourself out for the whole year doing 75 hard, do not do 75 hard. I created a super bad relationship with alcohol and food after 75 hard. I became a binge eater after 75 hard because I wouldn't buy things in order to actively not eat them. But whenever they were in my presence, I'm eating 5 cookies. You know, I couldn't just eat 1 cookie because I'm like, oh, I'm treating myself now. And alcohol was the same thing. Like, I demonized people that drank. And it took me over 1.5 years to realize that alcohol is actually pretty good in moderation. Most things are. Like, I'm celebrating this person's wedding. Like, they're supposed to do this once in their life. You know, I'm going to have the tequila shot with them if they want. And I'm going to drink water afterwards. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to hydrate, and it's going to be a lower day, and I can accept that. I don't have to be down on myself. I have to beat myself up. But I'm not going to do that every weekend. I'm not going to do that during the week. And that's just a choice that I make, you know, because I know that performance for me and my mental health for me is just more important than that one night out on the town. So
that's one of the problems that I have with 75 hard. And I always say 75 hard is not going to solve your problems.
It's going to just bring them to the surface. They're going to bubble up.
Because it's just so much discipline, it's great for a lot of people who are lacking that discipline, and they're missing one of the key components of actual lifestyle change and changing your habits, which is the mindset and like the stories and the language that you tell yourself around these things. So I haven't done 75 hard for that reason. Like, I'm pretty good, soft talk acknowledged, good with discipline.
Yeah.
And so, all right, let's circle back to one of the most loving men on this planet that I've come in contact with, Chopper Dave. The Chop. Yep. So how did you first meet Dave?
Man, okay. Think about this.
Which, by the way, Brooks mentioned this to me. Apparently, we first met at Ocean Lab.
You and I?
Yeah. I don't remember.
At Ocean Lab during the coaches conference?
The Strong Coach Summit.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I was working that day.
Yeah, little side tangent there. But yeah, apparently we've already met.
Okay. That's so wild. I didn't have his hairdo back then. Okay. Chopper Dave. It can be traced back to Izzy. So Kenneth, barefoot shoes.
Yep.
They were sponsoring a girl at Squatch. And I realized that Kenneth was from Richmond, which is where I was born. And I was like, that seems like an interesting synchronicity. I'm going to check into that. And so I actually ended up doing a couple marketing videos for Kenneth and Vincent. And whenever they came to town for something, I think it was a not Tough Mudder, Spartan. It's one of their Spartans. They came to town and Vincent was like, hey, will you come to lunch with us? And so I went to lunch with them, met him there, and Dave was there. And so I think at this point, I've been very careful about who I told about this concept of riding a bike across the country. But I knew that I should tell certain people, right? The kind of people that are going to push you, not be like, are you sure you can do that? Why would you do something like that? You're crazy.
Yeah.
You know, like, don't tell those people your wildest ideas. That's a bad idea. That's where dreams go to die.
Or do and use that to fuel you. Like, okay, motherfucker, you want to see?
It's good fuel. It's good fuel. It burns dirty, but it's good fuel. And so Dave was there at this lunch, and I start, telling them this idea that I'm having about riding a bike across the country. And I'm telling it mainly to Vincent because Vincent's the only guy that I know. And Dave, I'm also hesitant. Like, I'm kind of trying to suss out how they feel about it. Could Kenneth maybe get involved? I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never fundraised or tried to make a pitch deck or make something like this happen.
You're just fucking around and finding out.
Fucking around and finding out. And I found out. But Dave's there, and he hears me with my language, of course, being a little bit, but kind of, and, sort of feels like, guess, maybe, could, might, possibly,
Soft talk.
He heard me soft talking, and he was like, Joe, I know we just met. I know we literally just met 5 minutes ago, but let me play a little something with you. He's like, let's imagine 20 years from now, you look back on the summer of 2021 and you biked across a continent, and everything that happened in between the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, just like try and fill in those gaps, all those memories you made, places you saw, people you met. Now, do the same thing 20 years from now. Imagine you didn't ride a bicycle across the country. What does that summer look like to you? Do you remember it? Did you spend the whole summer with your friends doing the things you would have normally done any other summer? Like, yeah, you might miss out. You might miss out on those things, but are you really missing out on anything if you go and do this? Or do you want to go and ride a bicycle across the country, say yes to the unknown, and create probably one of the biggest life-changing experiences of your life? And I think I just smiled at him. I was like, damn, you just fucking convinced me. Right?
Yeah.
So at that point, he knew what he did. And he knew that he was on the hook.
He's a pro.
He was like, but he knew that if this man's going to commit to, that's using all these kinds of words, if he's going to commit to doing something like this, I should probably like take the next step with them. Like, how can I make sure that this is a success? And so he set up a call with me. He was like, this one's on me. He set up a call, and I think a couple weeks later, we met up on Zoom or the phone or something, and he had a couple exercises for me. He was like, what are your top 4 biggest fears about this bike ride? And I think number 4 was the bike breaks, right? Number 3 was Patrick, my van driver and photographer and best friend, and I would get in a fight, and he would ditch me or be like, I'm leaving. You don't need me to do this, etc. And so I'd be on my own. Number 2 was I get so hurt that every second is a constant question of if I should give up or not. And number 1 was I get so injured that I have to quit. It's my biggest fear. And he was like, okay. I've never done any exercises like this before. Huge. Premeditatio malorum, imagine the worst and prepare for it. Totally changed my life. And he was like, okay. Now, those things have happened. What are you going to do? I was like, okay. So number 4, my bike breaks. Walmarts exist. The worst thing one of the worst things to ride would be a Walmart bike. But like, would it be funny?
Improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Right?
Yeah.
Would it take a lot longer? Yeah, probably. Number 3 was Pat leaves. He was like, okay, you have a friend named Dave, like, okay, there's always other people that could take that spot. Number 2 was I get so injured that every day is a constant battle. He was like, one day at a time. And number 1, I get so injured I have to quit. The road will always be there. Okay. I mean, technically number 1 would be like I die, right? But like, let's think about this in terms of how I can think about it after the fact of these things happening. And so he prepared me with those kinds of things. He's like, all right, now that you've imagined probably every possible thing that could go wrong along the road, now you've made it to the Pacific Ocean. How does that feel? And I recorded this conversation with Dave because I was like, I know that I'm going to need this. How does it feel to arrive at the Pacific Ocean? I crossed a continent from ocean to ocean. I got out of the Atlantic, got on a bicycle, traveled across, got off a bicycle, and hopped in the Pacific. How do you feel? And I told him I felt like this moment would feel like I finally began this adventure I call my own, holding the hand of my childhood self. Because I did this ride for mental health awareness. I went through massive existential crisis, like multiple times as a young adult and a kid, way too early, and struggle with mental health, specifically like depression, suicide, things like that. And romanticism was one thing that saved me. But doing things like this and doing things like this for a cause to tell an allegory of mental health about whenever it gets the toughest is whenever it's the most important to continue. And so whenever this accident happened on the bike ride, I played that audio of me and Dave every day in the morning. That's how I started my day. It's like, it's just day by day. What does it feel like to get to the Pacific Ocean? What does it feel like to take this day by day? And I made it across through no other reason than that I had friends there to do it with, who Davis, Angel, is an angel. He took wilderness outdoor first aid a couple years ago, for summer, maybe multiple summers, I don't know. But I was covered in road rash on my thigh, on my calf, on my butt, on my arm, on my side, on my shoulder. And he wrapped all of those twice a day. He put the antibacterial cream on it. He washed them. He wrapped me up. Like, that is love, man. And that is, yeah, Pat said, he didn't tell me this until afterwards, but he said, we actually never once guessed or thought that you were going to quit. We never once questioned, what if he doesn't make it? What if we don't make it? What if we don't finish this thing? It was tough, but we knew that as a team, we could make this happen. And that kind of belief, from friends about your capabilities and what you can do and what you can do together, just totally shattered any previous comprehension of what friendship was. And those are two of my best friends, like blood brothers. Pat and I went to Kilimanjaro together. Davis wasn't able to make that one, but just massive, massive friendship. And Dave Robinson prepared us for those moments, because if we had gone into that having no previous thought of what if, it would have been a lot scarier. And whenever I had two friends with me instead, it was a challenge that we could approach day by day by day by day by day for 18 days on the road and 14 days in hotel rooms. Excruciating pain. So that's Dave.
Power of the tribe.
Yeah.
Write Your Own Story is tattooed on your right arm.
Right here.
In your mother's handwriting.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the Ace of Water. We've talked a lot about you writing your own story up until this point. What is the Ace of Water?
The Ace of Water is the deck of cards we created. It's the Ace of Spades. But we created this deck of cards for the bike ride where every single card had a question about your story, specifically formulated in the hero's journey format. So, there's call to adventure, meets a mentor, crosses into the unknown, trials and tribulations, successes and failures, growth, and then death, rebirth, revelation, gifts, wisdom, returns back. And funny enough, like after designing these cards and these questions to fit that hero's journey narrative, the bike ride took a very, very exact path toward that. And so the Ace of Water is the hardest question in the deck. If you haven't answered or at least thought about the answers to those previous questions, so all the way from the two of air to the Ace of Water, all of those questions gradually get harder. They get deeper. They get more intentional. The Ace of Water question relies on every other question to really know the answer to it. Like who's the villain in your story? You have to know that in order to know what does the ending of your story look like and what has the hero overcome? What is this overarching theme within your life that you are refusing to look at, that you refuse to change, that you refuse to venture into the unknown and to tackle it and to fight with it? And those questions are still bubbling up. I don't really think most of us do know the answer to that question. Like there's probably a pretty obvious answer for a lot of people, but like, what is it deeper and deeper and deeper? Like, what is it about yourself? And so the Ace of Water for me is a reminder that my story has an end, and that I hope at the end of my story, I can say that I have overcome the biggest obstacle in my life. And that's probably me, right? And so I put it on my wrist because my grandmother is the one who got me into cards. So a lot of my tattoos are tributes to the people that have played the biggest roles in my life. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, Meemaw, is the one who taught me to play cards, and she will boast that she never let me win. And so I asked her, because I wanted to get a tattoo of her favorite card. And I asked her what her favorite card was in the deck. And of course, naturally, as a competitive woman that she is, said the Ace of Spades. And so I converted that to the Ace of Water. And I put it here so that I could have an ace up my sleeve and a joker in my sock, because I have a joker from my uncle who passed away from cancer on my ankle. And it's that symbolism and that meaning through other people and the impact that they've made in my life that really gives me so much more drive, and gives my own personality that much more depth whenever I can realize, you've even played a role in my life just here today. How is that gonna impact me for the rest of my life? The same goes for our parents, our best friends, our ex-girlfriends, our current lovers, everyone plays a role. And so this is a signifier of the role that my grandmother has played in my life, and a reminder of my memento mori, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. 2 final questions. What are you most excited about?
This one's been challenged a lot lately. You know, I think a lot of my life, and even especially in the last couple of years, I've been planning for that next thing. You know, planning for the bike ride, planning for Kilimanjaro, planning for Mexico or El Salvador or a row across the Atlantic or sailing around Australia, whatever that might be. And something that I've realized lately is that I am living right now. We know that. We're awake. And I have stopped right now. And I think part of it is because of love. But I have stopped constantly yearning for what is to come. I still have excitement, you know, about things that are to come. But what I'm excited about, what I'm most excited about right now, is that I think I'm the most present that I've ever been. I'm excited about this conversation we're currently having. Like, this is the now. And I get to be here in it. And everything that I say can impact the way that it goes. And I get to, you know, go through this life with you in this moment. And so I'm most excited for the next moment, for this moment, because it feels good, it feels refreshing, and it feels like heaven. I wanted to briefly go over this concept of heaven and hell. And I read this book about love. I think it's like a little pamphlet. I'll butcher the name of it, but it basically says that people think heaven and hell are something that's not on earth, that it's the afterlife, whenever every single person, every single day is creating either their own heaven or their own hell, and they can impact that. And it's literally just a choice. The negative things that happen to you in your life may eventually be a positive thing, which might eventually be a negative thing. And so just learning and living in this sense of love to, you know, go back on what you said earlier, like, what are you most excited about? I'm excited about love. Love is this presence. And I feel so at home in not just myself, but also this relationship that I'm in. And it's really exciting. And I was talking to Lauren a couple weeks ago because we're both in this very tough spot in our jobs where it's just a lot of stress. You know, there's a lot of, you know, things rolling around and people, you know, running around with their hair on fire and trying to pull this aspect of presence out of you and make you feel stressed. And we've talked about how we're excited for like the things that are to come. And I had this realization and I told her about it. I was like, you know, I keep thinking that the next thing is going to be awesome. Like whenever financial freedom finally arrives, right? And I don't have to worry about what I do with my money or where I put it or where I get it or what I do with my time. Those times will arrive. But the more that I pursue those times and the harder I work to make them come faster, the less that I live in this current moment. And this specific chapter is what falling in love feels like. I've never felt this before. I've never felt this kind of love. And why would I want to accelerate that process to get through that so that I can get to financial freedom? And then whenever I look back, it was like, oh, that was what falling in love felt like. Why didn't I enjoy it just a little bit more? And so I've really been taking these, I call them note card moments, so that I can reflect on them in the future, write about them, etc. And I take in the moment. I like pause for a second and take in the moment with Lauren or with myself and really just be present so that I can look back on that moment and be like, that was it. That was what that felt like.
Last question. What does thriving mean to you?
Thriving. Interesting. Thriving is a life seated. Thriving is a life seated in passion. It can be high, it can be low. You can have its ups and its downs and its shitty moments and its incredible moments. And I think that the purpose behind all that is in pursuing your passions and making sure that, you know, maybe it is love. Maybe that is your passion, right? I think that whatever it might be, if you're pursuing that thing, even if you're down, you know, even if you're poor, even if you have no food and, you know, to most people, you're not thriving, if you can adjust that lens and look through it in terms of like, this is just the way, this is the journey that I'm on, then you can be thriving. And, you know, I think Kilimanjaro had a very interesting perspective because we flew through Doha, Qatar. And on the way there, it was like the most wealth in the world, right? As a layover. There's like Lamborghinis in the airport, you know, people walking around with gold watches and not a single smile in sight. And then we arrived in Tanzania at the shadow of Kilimanjaro. There's trash burning. There's people walking around without shoes on.
Which is great.
Which is great. There's people walking around without clothes, you know, and they're all smiling. And it made you question, like, immediately upon landing there, like, what do they know that we don't? Or what have we forgotten that they haven't? Right? And so I think that taking all the lenses you possibly can off thriving and just realizing that, like, it's just here, you know? You can thrive in any moment that you want to. In a storm, on the beach, at a funeral, you know? Just a matter of the perspective you take on it.
Being present.
Yeah.
My purpose is to make thriving standard. So that's why I've got this podcast sticker for you.
Awesome.
That's what I do with my coaching. My purpose is to help people find that presence in themselves and be healthy, be happy, to pursue what they want to. So thank you for helping me fulfill my purpose to make thriving standard by telling your story.
Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah. Where can we find more about you and Fourwards?
So Fourwards Movement, spelled FOURWARDS, .com is our website. Our Instagram is the number 4, WARDS MVMT. And then my Instagram is Joe Lindley 16 with a D. That's where you'll find most of it. We are also working on these 2 documentaries currently. The first one is going to be for Kilimanjaro, which, brief synopsis of Kilimanjaro is that one of my friends that I made at Ocean Lab, his grandfather passed away before fulfilling his lifelong dream of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And whenever he was cremated, we decided that we would bring his ashes to the summit. I won't spoil the story there. And then the second documentary is the documentary of the ride across America. And it's specifically titled Into the Wind because with mental health, it can often feel like a battle into the wind, like the wind's working against you. So those documentaries we're working on currently. We'd hope to have Kilimanjaro out by the fall on YouTube. And then the ride documentary will be probably more so like a full feature length. We want to enter it into contests and hopefully get it onto Netflix or something. So I'm sure that they'll see it eventually. But look out for those because those are where my soul lies currently. It is most of me and how my brain thinks and how my soul functions. So,
Joe, thank you for coming on the Captain's Lifestyle podcast.
Thanks, Cap. Appreciate you.
Live the Captain's Lifestyle.